who is going to introduce our next guest. We will be back to discuss this because the drama is not yet over. Great discussion.
Yeah. So, first of all, huge round of applause for the presidents of Georgia and Ukraine.
Thank you.
I'm Fred Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. I have 35 pages of introductory remarks, none of which I'm going to make, because we really want to get into this. This has been an exciting 2 days. There are probably no two countries whose fate lies more in the hands of the unity of the West and the unity of purpose of the West. While your two countries differ in more ways than one, you both operate on the front lines of the contest with Russia and over the future of the European order. It's clear that both of you wish to strengthen your engagement with NATO, with Europe, with Euro-Atlantic institutions. So, to address these issues and more, I'm honored to welcome you, Your Excellency Giorgi Margvelashvili. I practiced that with you at least 10 times.
Made it great.
Mr. President, it's great to have you here. And then, of course, President Petro Poroshenko, winner of the Atlantic Council Global Citizen Award not too long ago. I'm going to skip your bios because everyone knows him. And I'm going to take everyone here into the room with the 29 plus the two of you. We're hearing a lot of what happened in that room. Was it threats? Was it pressure? Did it turn out all right? Was today a victory for NATO from your standpoint, from being in the room? What was the atmosphere of the room? Or was it a setback? So maybe Mr. President from Ukraine, maybe you could start, and then the Georgian President after you, please.
First of all, I'm really happy to be here and thank all the audience. And happy to be here in Brussels because it was an attempt not to allow to provide the North Atlantic Council today, tomorrow, with the participation of Ukraine and Georgia. And I want to say that not only the session, but also the whole 2 days, including the yesterday's statement of the all member states, is extremely promising. What is the most important thing? We call aggressor Russian Federation, who illegally make an illegal annexation of the Crimea, make and open and launch the aggression on the east of my country. We, day before yesterday, in the documents of European Union, and today and yesterday in the documents of the alliance, of the NATO, named it aggressor. This is important from the also position of the international law. The thing that the whole world now starts to understand what's going on in Ukraine. This is not a frozen conflict. This is a hot war. And every single day, Ukrainians giving their lives to protect democracy, to protect freedom, not only in Ukraine, but in the whole Europe and in the whole world. And this is the aggression on the east flank of the NATO. And that's why the strong message of unity of all the member states and strong message of solidarity with Ukraine as with Georgia, we hear today in the sessions. It was, it seems to me, 19 leaders of the states of the government have a floor on the discussion, and we have from every single speech a strong message for support Ukraine, a strong message for solidarity, a strong message to Russia that they should undertake the necessary step to return Ukrainian sovereignty to the all-occupied territory, the strong message that NATO should be stronger to increase the volume of finance, the part of the GDP. I want to inform you that Ukraine now spends about 6% of our GDP in the very difficult situation, 6% of our GDP to finance our security and defense sector. And even the war is not the reason for not providing reform. And I'm proud to say that in Ukraine we do more reform during the last 3.5, 4 years than for the previous 23 years. And we come to this session not with empty hands. we bring absolutely new law, national security law, which provide interoperability, all Ukrainian security and defense sector with the NATO and with the NATO standard. We introduce a new civilian control on our Minister of Defense, on our secret, parliamentary control on our secret service, parliamentary control on our intelligence service, and this is the beginning of the great work for the preparation Ukraine for the membership. And the most important thing, I don't know if my colleague Giorgi support that, but the message that the door of NATO is open for Ukraine and for Georgia. And the decision of Bucharest summit, which was a historic decision which was made 10 years ago, is confirmed today. And no any country in the world can prohibit to Ukrainian people or to Georgian people make a decision to be a member of the NATO. And what is the changes happen? In year 2013, only 16% of Ukrainians support NATO integration. And now is more than 54% of Ukrainians support NATO integration. Do you know who do that? Who united Ukrainian nation? Putin.
Yeah.
Putin make us very pro-European. Putin make us more responsible to the future of our country. Putin make us a strong push to the NATO membership, and I'm absolutely confident that we hear today from most of the leaders of NATO the future of Ukraine, I hope the future of Georgia, would be a membership.
So I'm going to come back to President Putin and also the summit in Helsinki, and I'm going to come back to Ukraine and Georgia, but a lot of people in this room weren't in the room with you with the 29, and it seems to have been a moment of truth of sorts. With President Trump and the other members. There was quite a bit of acrimony, it seems, from what we've heard from the outside regarding burden sharing. So I'll come back to the questions of Georgia, Mr. President. But first of all, what was the mood in the room and how did you witness that? And then after that, let me talk to you about whether you think this summit has been a good one for Georgia.
Well, let me start from something that I said in that meeting, that we completely support Ukraine in its struggle, and this is not only a political statement, but it's a statement of people to people, which I, as a president, just brought to the summit. And we support the struggle for freedom, and unfortunately, the same way that they are taking, the way that we had to go, and that we are on. My feeling. And of course, I agree with Petro's assessment, with his feelings from that meeting. But my feeling was a feeling of unity on this issue, on the issue of Ukraine and Georgia. And we heard very clear messages from our great friends, the leaders of NATO countries, which were confirming NATO's and the member countries' position about telling the truth that Petro already described. I will not go into the detail. The truth that what Russian Federation has done to its neighbors is aggression, is occupation, and that this will not be tolerated by the leaders, by the countries, by the NATO itself. And the discussions which are happening during these 2 days on the issues concerning burden sharing, I felt this discussion as a part and a complementary part of the issue about Georgia and Ukraine, because what are we talking about? We are talking about the threat and strengthening and congregating around the protection against this threat. I mean, if we are talking about burden sharing, it's a burden sharing on defense, and defense against aggressiveness of Russian Federation. And so it was a feeling that we are sitting amongst our great friends, amongst allies, and in this respect, I had a feeling that Georgia was very straightforward in its vision of future, and in its vision concerning the burden sharing as well. I mean, it's year 16 since Georgia has first applied to NATO. Yeah. It's year 10 since NATO has committed to membership of Georgia. And it's a year when we can proudly say that we stood together with our allies in one or another form, in Kosovo, in Iraq, in Mali, in Central African Republic. We are the biggest contributor per capita to the Resolute Support Mission. So in that respect, I mean, I have a feeling that we came out with this moment of truth, agreeing about the vision concerning Russian Federation actions, concerning our unity to try to overcome these obstacles as a family of nations which has the same value.
So let me follow up with you on that, and this will be a question for both of you. I had the opportunity to be at the Bucharest summit. Some people argued at the time that NATO went too far in offering what it was offering to Ukraine and Georgia. Some people say it didn't go far enough, and it really encouraged Putin to take more aggressive actions, which of course he thereafter did. I would like you to give your view on that, but then also compare it to the position now, because there was disunity over how to address your situation. Where are we now in that respect, and what kind of message is being sent to your publics regarding NATO?
The theory, and that's a great question. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer to that issue. The theory that the war in Georgia in August of 2008 was triggered by the Bucharest summit decision is simply false. And let me give you the argument. Georgia was not occupied in 2008. Georgia, these two regions were occupied in beginning of 90s. And when Georgia was occupied, it was not that kind of direct occupation. It was something that we call now as hybrid war. It happened in 90s. And my predecessor, President Shevardnadze, was trying to communicate to this to international community that, well, we are occupied by Russia. And that in 90s, there was no talk about NATO membership of Georgia. There was no talk about Georgia's EU membership. It was a clear punishment to a free nation that decided to build its own policy independently. So anyone who says that the 2008 war was triggered by Bucharest simply doesn't turn a page behind in history and doesn't look at the fact that the occupation was there in 2008, but the occupation took the other form. It was since 90. So I think that that's a very clear answer to that theory. And I believe we have to make very bold and clear moves and clear messages to the Russian Federation to be even more decisive in embracing the strongholds which serve the goal of common stability and security for NATO and for EU, and embrace countries like Georgia, embrace countries like Ukraine who commit themselves to these values and commit their future to these values, and embrace them even more actively, not to give temptation for any kind of aggressive actions.
So, President Poroshenko, let me phrase it just a little bit differently and more appropriate for Ukraine. Unlike Georgia, you haven't actively sought NATO membership, while Georgia has. 4 days after the Sochi Olympics was when we had the Crimea surprise. The World Cup will soon be over. Helsinki summit on Monday. Do you worry about another surprise? Do you think that there's enough NATO unity being sent toward Putin? In short, how do you think Vladimir Putin, President Putin, will be reading the outcome of this summit? And what advice would you be giving to President Trump for Helsinki?
Point number one, the events which taking place in 20th of February 2014 was not a surprise. It was illegal annexation of the Crimea by Russian Federation. Putin says several times, there is no Russian troops there, this is not us, this is the people movement, this is some green soldiers without any label. That was Russian occupation of the Crimea. And answering, first of all, I want to say a full solidarity with Georgia, with the Georgian people. Ukrainian president, Ukrainian authorities was exactly 10 years ago in August the 2008, together with the Georgian people, when Russia provided the aggressive operation in Georgia, bombing Tbilisi. We, in the year 2014, we just answering the question, what's going on with NATO? Is NATO go too far? Who is responsible for that? Answer is very clear. Putin. Why? Because beforehand it existed the post-war security system based on the Security Council of the United Nations, based on the unanimity of the permanent member of the Security Council. When one of the members of the Security Council is an aggressor, this mechanism is not working anymore, completely destroyed. And the practice demonstrates that the only mechanism which effectively works is NATO. Not existing any other mechanism. And those countries who do not want to attack anybody, who want to protect their sovereignty, their territorial integrity, their independence, want to cooperate and to be the member of NATO. We have another security guarantee, Budapest Memorandum. We were the third biggest nuclear power in the world. Can you imagine that if Ukraine has a nuclear power, we would be the object of the aggression? Never. And because of the non-proliferation strategy, we give up the third biggest arsenal and receive in exchange security guarantee from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from France, from China, and from Russia. Where now this guarantee? 4 years, thousands of Ukrainian soldiers with a weapon in their hands protected themselves, our sovereignty. Can you imagine that almost 3,000 Ukrainian soldiers were killed? More than 10,000 civilians were killed. Who is responsible for this innocent victim? Putin. And with that situation, does we have in general any other choice than go to NATO? Why it's so important for Putin? Very simple. With Ukraine, Putin transformed to the empire. Without Ukraine, Russia would be just an ordinary state. Very simple. And with that situation, does Ukraine would be zone of the personal interest of Putin or Russia? With that situation, he gives the permission for migrate 45 million nation to where to go, where not to go. Or Ukraine has a right for their sovereign choice, where millions of the people 4 years ago go to the revolution of dignity, not demanding rising up salary or not demanding lowering up the taxes. They are demanding go back to the European family. And we successfully do that during the last 4 years. We receive and ratify association agreement, we receive visa-free, we receive deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, and now more than almost 50% of our trade is with the European Union, and the form of cooperation, the form of the reform is absolutely unique.
So let me bring this up to the present, the end of this summit, the Helsinki summit. So, Mr. President, first for you and then to President Poroshenko. You point out the right thing, the Budapest Memorandum. So that underscores that the West's actions or inactions have a big impact on your two countries. So if you're looking at this summit, you can either say NATO has come together, this is a good outcome, the President Trump has just said it's stronger than ever before, or you can look at all the fighting that's led up to this and the acrimony there and say, you know, it's really not a united NATO. And I have to worry about the future of the West and how it's going to respond to my country. So first, for you, Mr. President, maybe you can address this. West's actions, inactions, what impact does it have on you? How do you feel? What message do you think the summit will send? What message do you want President Trump to send in Helsinki?
Well, I think we are on the same page as we have been before. This is sending a clear message that any kind of violations of international law will not be tolerated. I want to go back to what, from where Petro started about the surprise, the word surprise. It was not a surprise. It was not a surprise because it was done in Georgia just 6 years ago. It was not a surprise what happened in Ukraine because Russia was not adequately enough responded for occupying regions of Georgia.
But it does seem to have caught U.S. intelligence agencies off guard at the very least.
Well, I'm not talking from the intelligence, I'm talking from political perspective, you know. I mean, in 2008, for violating the basic rule of law and the basics of how the nations live and interact with each other, Russia was not enough punished for that on Georgian case. So why it was so rapid and active in 2014, they just had exercised this in Georgia. They just have, tragically to say, but successfully made the operation work in Georgia. So it was sort of easier to do this once again because they knew how to do it and they have tested how it happens, what will be the reaction. Well, we think that, I mean, my position is that we have to send clear messages. And we have to be very clear, in some cases as clear as Russians are, in linking their rhetorics and their actions. Let's remember when 2008 happened. It happened after the 2007 Munich conference, where President Putin has clearly and openly said to the entire international community that they have their privileged interests in their neighborhood. And after 2007, then was 2008 Georgia, and then was 2014 Ukraine. So their communication is clear. And now in 2018, we saw once again aggressive rhetorics of Russia. They send a clear message. I believe the countries that respect the rule of law, respect international relationships, have to commit to this respect. It's not enough to respect, you have to commit yourself to this respect. And in that respect, I think that it should be the message should be very clearly laid out to President Putin that this kind of attitude will not be tolerated.
Yeah. So I want to go to the audience, but President Poroshenko, both of you seem to want to avoid talking about the Helsinki summit. Maybe I'll put it a different way.
Oh yeah, you asked me about Helsinki.
So we can go to that. So we had the Georgia invasion, we had the illegal annexation of Crimea, we had the action in Syria, we had the intervention in U.S. elections. What's the next thing we should be worrying about? World Cup is over, Helsinki summit happening. What worries you could come next from Russia?
First of all, look, I hate the idea to predict something what's happening on Monday. But now I think that I tried to do that. Point number one. Normally I'm a very optimistic person. But unfortunately, it would not be any optimistic surprise from Helsinki. This is bad news. At the same time, it would not be any pessimistic surprise, which is good news. It would be just meeting and launching the discussion. The tone of the discussion and the agenda is promising. Ukraine would be among top priority. Non-recognition of the Crimea, illegal annexation, definitely would be a position. Launching the discussion not bring immediate results. But what we expecting from this meeting? Point number one, peace. Then the occupation. Peace and security package based on the Minsk agreement can be provided and secured only with a peacekeeping operation under the mandate of Security Council, with a full mandate of peacekeepers who can come and protect the people living there. Presence of the peacekeepers can save from 15 to 27 lives of the soldiers and about 10 lives of the civilians every single month. This is the price we save if Trump would be successful enough, together with the Normandy format, to deliver the arguments that there is no any other arguments not to vote for peacekeepers.
So,
Can anybody explain why anybody refusing to vote for peacekeepers? The same way, today Ukrainian parliament ratified the law proposed by me in the investigation team leading by our Dutch representative for the plane MH17. We beforehand want to use it through the tribunal based on the mandate of Security Council of United Nations. At that time, Russia used a veto right against this tribunal. Do you know what does it mean, veto right on the tribunal in MH17? This is a recognition of Russian responsibility for the terroristic attack on the 298 innocent victims was different nation from all over the world and being responsible for these 298 innocent victims, which was happening exactly 4 years ago in the sky of the occupied Ukraine, doing by Russian missile, by Russian officer, and by order of Russian general.
so President,
Let's not forget about that.
President Poroshenko, we have about 10 minutes for questions, but your staff is indicating that you have an appointment to get to. Shall we excuse you, or can you join us for questions for 10 minutes?
Look, we have just one question because we have a very important bilateral meeting connecting with the Helsinki.
Then we understand.
That's why, please.
Then we understand completely. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
One question I'm ready accept from the audience. Because
Okay,
it is unfair just to speak among three of us and not giving any one single question.
So let's take these two questions right here.
Just one.
That's all right. You can ask for both of them. Ask for both of them. And you let us know when you need to go.
Thank you. I represent Rustavi 2 Broadcasting Company here, the biggest private, critical and pro-European television, which has been oppressed by government for quite a long time, to the extent that the Strasbourg Court of Human Rights took an unprecedented decision and suspended the ruling of the Supreme Court of Georgia. In this regard, I would like to express the gratitude to President Margvelashvili for supporting the freedom of expression and media pluralism in Georgia. But my question is about Russian propaganda and the narrative that Russian propaganda is instilling in Georgia, which says that no matter what you do, no matter how you comply with the NATO standards, you will never be accepted to NATO. So in this light, President Margvelashvili, how are you going to communicate the statement made by President Trump today that Georgia will become member of NATO at some point, and how are you going to persuade NATO skeptics in Georgia that the door is still open? So, on the whole, are you content with the results?
I'll remember that question.
Yeah, Mr. President, let's do that. I know this will be a Ukraine. Is your Ukraine question? Here we go. Here and then there. Yes. So then we'll take these two and then we'll come back and we'll end.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm Olena Trekub from Ukraine. I'm a Millennium Fellow at Atlantic Council. Also, I represent Transparency International Defense and Security Anti-Corruption Defense Committee. And my question is about our defense reform. In the communique, Article 66 says about fight against corruption. It complements us on adopting the law on national security. And in that law, we speak about transparency of defense spending and procurement and the defense budget. But as you know, currently our transparency is pretty low because over 50% of procurement that is happening in the Ministry of Defense is classified. So it's over $500 million. Do you think it is acceptable level? And if it's not, when do you think you commit to changing that? Thank you.
I got what you mean. First of all, I am the author of the national security law. And I prescribe in this law more transparency in the security sector. Because beforehand, this is not because of the corruption, but because of the confidentiality of the information connected with the military expenditure for the country during the war. And we have Russian FSB throughout the country. But I think that now it is important to demonstrate the transparency. And that's why I present this draft law to the Parliament. I am very much proud that Parliament support me And a few days ago, we signed out this law. And today, I hope and keep my fingers crossed, in 1 hour time, our parliament will vote the final amendment about the creation of anti-corruption court, finishing the creation of full anti-corruption infrastructure, starting from National Anti-Corruption Bureau, National Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office, unique electronic declaration when 1,200,000 Ukrainians fill up is an element, key element for the fighting against corruption, and finishing with a great, absolutely independent anti-corruption court, first time, never practiced in the world, which would be created with the participation of the foreign expert, of the organizations starting from the European Union and maybe finishing with NATO, for the specializing in fighting against corruption and participating in the creation of the court. That was my responsibility before Ukrainian people, to propose them this unique mechanism for providing the full independence of the all anti-corruption institutions. That's why I'm for transparency, and that's why I'm proud that Ukraine are now demonstrating unique leadership in this process. And I'm proud that our neighbor states, including those who in the Eastern Partnership, are learning our experience and to introducing that in their practice. So, my dear friend, thank you very much indeed.
Mr. President.
I will support everything Giorgi said about freedom of press, but at the same time we need to fight against fake news, because this is the key element of the hybrid war. And I welcome the legislation of the fake news which was introduced in France in the last few days. And that's what we speak with the President Emmanuel Macron, and we absolutely differ. We give our full efforts to protect the freedom of press, but give us the full efforts to fight in one of the key element of the hybrid war of Russia, no matter if it tries to undermine internal stability or representing the fake news or make a direct attack on Ukrainian sovereignty. And I want to thank all of you for supporting Ukraine. This is a key element for us. Thank you.
Good luck with your mission, Petro.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President, just on your way out, I'll say what I was going to say at the end, which is Georgia's freedom and sovereignty and Ukraine's freedom and sovereignty is the common cause of a lot of people in this room. So let's continue. Let me take two other questions for Georgia. I've got one, and then we'll close. If I can see two other questions, please. We'll take those two right there.
Thank you very much. Is it go? Okay. Thank you very much, both Ukrainian and Georgian. I am very happy to have you here. I am from Lithuania, Member of Parliament, NATO Parliamentary Assembly Vice President as well. I have one short message and one short question. The message is such. You both, Ukraine and Georgia, you need to become members of NATO. But on the other hand, we in NATO, we need you in NATO because of democracy is the key element for Europe because it's security. More democracy, more security. Or as well, Russia. We can help Russia providing membership to Georgia and Ukraine because without those influence into these countries, they will not be as imperialistic as they are now. And my question, how could you answer for those, they still think in the Western countries that Ukrainian and Georgian membership in NATO can provoke Russia?
Yeah.
What would be your answer?
Good question. And please, last question. Right here. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. My question is about the Black Sea. I'm coming from Bulgaria, Velizar Shalamanov. So, sir, how do you see future of cooperation in the Black Sea basin, including NATO and EU role, from your perspective, Georgia? Thank you.
Thank you.
And please also the Helsinki question in your final remarks.
What was
the question is what concerns you, or what would you have President Trump say, which is sort of in the thinking of what I always like asking leaders like you in such a exposed geographic position, what keeps you awake at night? So these questions, and then what keeps you awake at night? What issue keeps you awake at night as you're looking at Russia? And then what would you have President Trump potentially do about it?
Well, let's start with the propaganda question, and I'll try to be brief on all of this. Maybe we have time for other questions. First of all, we have a very strong argument on the Georgia European and Euro-Atlantic integration path. First of all, we have a great example of our friends and allies which are now in NATO and in EU, example like Lithuania, like Poland, like great supporters of Georgia, that also had to go through a long waiting period until they got there, and they didn't lose patience, and they, by the way, had less of great supporters and great friends in NATO than we have, because we have so many Georgia interested countries who further our agenda on their own, and they want to get Georgia in both of the unions. So we have that. We have a clear path of Georgia for the last 10 years, where every summit was a step forward, including this very summit, where we have congregation of the leaders of the NATO clearly envisioning and clearly calling what happened in Georgia and Ukraine the name of Russian aggression and of occupation of independent states, and still very clearly stating that we will become NATO members, and at the same time giving us more tools for our defensibility. Because we heard lots of very clear commitments from the NATO countries about increase of the tools that we have in hands, of intensifying the support to increase Georgia's defensibility and NATO's presence in Georgia. This is one thing. I mean, I think that we have a very clear argument, an argument that is based on previous experiences of our allies, and that is based on a continuous progress that we all witness, if we want to witness it, and if we want to call the things by its name and not fall under propaganda. Provoking Russia. I fully disagree. I fully disagree with the vision that somehow intensified Georgia NATO process is provoking anyone. I think the unclear language is much more provoking, not only in this case, in every other case, because by unclear messages, by unclear steps, by not taking bold decisions, we provoke in any political system more hawkish thinking. More hawks are provoked by unclear and unclear messaging. And that's the rule for not only for this case. I would say that's the general rule. Once again, go to your knowledge of how the Cold War ended. It ended by a very clear messages and very clear moves. It ended by a clear message to tear the wall down, and it ended by the actions that brought prosperity and security to millions. But it didn't end, unfortunately. The goal was not reached in Georgia, because since that time we are fighting war for our independence. When the great countries of Central and Eastern Europe were regaining their independence, we were fighting the war for our independence, which goes for the next 26 days. And there was one more question.
We got the Black Sea, and we're running a little bit out of time.
We are very enthusiastic about the Black Sea. Georgia is especially engaged. We are enthusiastic about the discussions. We are enthusiastic that Georgia became part of these discussions in context of NATO and security. But we are very enthusiastic about the Black Sea also because we give the coast to major developing landlocked economies of Asia. And that means that this is the sea of opportunities for us and for you. And I had a very good discussion with your president on these issues just yesterday, and we have a vision that intensifying this communication and using Georgian coast as a gateway to European markets is something that has a great perspective. And with NATO, we are also encouraged by the ongoing discussions and our engagement. And finally, about Helsinki, I thought I answered the question by saying that we have to send the clear message to President Putin that the toleration of the international law, that the violation of the international law will not be accepted. That is the message I hope to be voiced in Helsinki.
Mr. President, you've been very generous with your time. It is an important signal that you and the Ukrainian president are both here at the NATO summit. I ask you all to stay in your seats while the president and I leave the room, and please stay in your seats too, because if I'm not mistaken, we have General Jones, General Scaparrotti, others. Usually they're just 2 stars on stage. Between them, they have 8. And so please stay for the next meeting. Thank you, and then thank you to Ukrainian Poroshenko as well.
Thank you. Thank you for great audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome